Hey everybody, it is Saturday morning and we are going to take a little trip around the world. I just got the lights turned on a little while ago and I've been wanting to do an around the world video here for a while. I don't feel like I've got a lot to talk about this week, or in this video I should say. It's probably been more than a week since I've caught everybody up to what's been going on in the fish room here. But we'll see how it goes. You know how it is with me. By the time I get going, you never know what we'll be talking about by the end of this video. So my little foot tank here is still doing well. I still have never gotten around to putting a pre-filter on that pump. I bought sponge, some of the coarse sponge material to replace what I took off of there. It's been months ago now, I guess. But when I had the sponge, the pre-filter sponge on the pump, it would get so clogged up with the biological gunge, the stuff that grows on the biological sponge filters, that would get so gunked up that within days I would have very, very restricted water flow to the point where it was barely trickling and a little drip coming off the rock there. But this, without any kind of pre-filter on it, I was afraid the snails were going to get in there and clog it up, and they have on one or two occasions, but for the most part, this is what we still look like after months of not really doing any maintenance on that pump at all. We've still got that much water flow. So as long as the water's flowing like that, personally, I don't care if the odd snail crawls in there and gets in the impeller and gets crunched up or something like that. As long as that impeller keeps flowing and that water keeps, flowing, that's all I'm concerned about. Otherwise, I haven't done much of anything in here other than remove a few guppies, and I removed one shrimp that I put up in my office tank, but that's been a couple of weeks now, so I've probably already covered that in videos past. As far as my actual waterfall tank proper, nothing really going on in here. I topped the water off a few days ago. I need to get in there and remove a little bit more of the duckweed. Again, with the duckweed, it's one of those things. It's kind of a nuisance. At the same time, I kind of like it. It looks normal. It looks natural to me. I'm used to seeing that kind of stuff in bodies of water. And as far as getting it out of this tank, I would have to start from scratch. I mean, if you really start looking around, you can see how much duckweed really grows everywhere. Even all the way back there, you can see duckweed. Got piles of it right here. It actually grows down the front. This is all just loose duckweed. I can pull the stuff off in clumps. So that, eventually makes its way down. Get rid of that clump there. Makes its way down and gets back in the tank. So even if I get the water cleaned off and get the surface of the water duckweed free, it's only a matter of time before I get more duckweed back in there. As far as this waterfall in general, I guess we'll shoot a video talking about it in an overall sense. I've been thinking more and more about it lately. I set that trash bag up there as sort of a temporary fix. I had planned on doing something a little more elaborate this summer, but, things have changed fairly radically since I planned on doing that last winter. And now both time, finances, ability to go out and go places, all that's been hampered quite a bit. And so we're probably going to be stuck with that. I think I can get rid of the trash bag. I think I put enough silicone in there. I definitely identified that the leak was at the bottom of this basin right here. And that trash bag was what prevented it from... That's how I figured it out. After figuring out that that's where the leak was by using the trash bag as a liner, I gooped silicone in there like nobody's business. So that should do it by itself. And if I removed that trash bag, it would probably be okay. And while it still wouldn't look great, it still does look like sort of a rubber rock that I built myself, which is exactly what it is. It would still look better than having that trash bag up there, and I could maybe work on getting some more plants. The plants I put in my little pond basin up here never took and started growing like I hoped they would. My arrowhead plant never flowed down, and sort of covered all that visually like I was hoping it would. So, I don't know. I was kind of putting everything on pause, expecting to redo this tank at some point. And now it looks like I'm not going to be redoing this tank, and so I'm kind of rethinking what I want to do with what's currently here and existing. But as far as what's actually been going on in the tank this week, not a lot. Again, just sort of topped off the water. I didn't even do a water change the last time I was in here. I checked the nitrates last time I was in here, just sort of keeping score. And again, they were yellowy brownish color, so we'll call it maybe 10 parts per million or something like that. And that was before I topped off the water, so it's even less than that now, so not anything to concern myself with. My bird's nest fern back there is doing fantastic, and then this Caladium here is doing pretty well too. And yes, this is still in the original bring it home from the shop pack. It's so late in the summer that I doubt we're gonna do anything with these. These are more or less, they're either annuals or they're soft bulbs and need to be stored inside over the winter. So I will either divide it up and leave it in the house all winter anyway, like I do with some of my other plants. You know, these all would not survive if they were left outside over the winter. So a lot of this stuff I bring in, and it gets overwintered in the house, and maybe we'll start working on doing some of that. Turn this light on, you can see how I need to start moving my Rex begonia back and out of the way. It's getting kind of, you know, interfering in what's going on in the tank a little bit there. And so now that I've just turned that light on, I'm going to go ahead and turn it all back off so we can continue on with the video. So we're already over 6 minutes in, and we haven't even got to the second tank yet, or third tank, I guess, technically, if you want to say it that way. So it's probably going to be a longer video than I was expecting. Anyway, moving on to my 29 Miscellaneous. Did a water change in this tank about a week to 10 days ago. I don't know if I talked about that in my last Round the World update. Nothing really to talk about. Basic water change. I didn't wipe the glass down. I didn't do anything other than change the filter pads like I always do, being that it's a hang on the back filter, and that's very simple. And then I simply did a water change, and that's all. This tank always just kind of ticks over like a clock. I did just change the filters again the other day. This tank these filters tend to get clogged up fairly rapidly, and when they do, I get a backflow that comes through the center section here, and that's how I know the filters are definitely ready to be replaced. And that's what I did last night, so everything's flowing fine again. Tank's nice and clean. Everybody's happy. Haven't lost any fish in there. And that's about all I can think of to talk about with my 29 Miscellaneous. I love loaches. Loaches are such awesome little fish. They really are. I've never met a species of loach yet that I don't like. Oh, nope. I gotta correct that as we move and look at the 55-gallon Gourami tank. I do have a loach in this tank that I don't particularly like. And we never see it because it hides, and it's reclusive, and it's aggressive, and it is a red-tail loach, and it always hides underneath this log. Every now and again you will see a little tip of its red tail sticking up back there. Right now we're looking at my rubber lip Pleco, but right where that rubber lip Pleco is where the entrance to the cave underneath that piece of wood. And that red-tailed loach has been basically living under that piece of wood for 5 or 6 years now. And again, not a very pleasant loach, never really comes out. I've only seen it every now and again when it comes out for food. I'll see its tail sticking out occasionally. I know it's still in there. I know it's still alive. But again, not the best loaches that I probably wouldn't buy another one of them if I had the opportunity. Other than that, I haven't yet met any loaches that I don't like. It's starting to look like I could probably get in there, maybe do another chemi-clean treatment, maybe wipe the back glass down just to get rid of that sort of reddish look, but that looks very, very much more red on camera here for some reason than it does to my eye. To my eye, that looks like more of a brown with sort of a purpley tinge to it, and it's actually an attractive color to me. I actually find it to be quite pretty, although I know what it is. I know it's a cyanobacteria in here. But I don't, again, I don't care. I've got a little bit of brownish purpley color on my rocks. Purple's my favorite color anyway, so that actually just kind of makes the tank look a little cooler to me. And of course we can also see it growing. Again, it comes out so much different looking on camera than that looks to my eyes. That to me looks like brown wood, dark brown wood, with a little bit of reddish purple tinge to it. And I look at the viewfinder on my camera, and it looks like I've got this strange piece of purple wood in the tank, and I got purple all over the back glass. And I assure you, it just does not look that noticeable and purple here in real life. But that's what it is. That's that red cyanobacteria that's growing in there. And I've always had it in this tank. I always will have it in this tank. We've talked about that lots of times. And again, it's not bothering me. The tank looks fine. So there you go. That's what's going on in my 55-gallon Gourami tank. We've probably got even less going on here in my, what I call my 55-gallon tank. Each tank's got to have a name so I can identify it, and this one used to be my Angelfish tank once upon a time, and eventually just became my 55-gallon tank because who knows what's going to be in here in the future. My Anubius is doing really well. I've got a little flower head coming out there. I know technically these aren't flowers, they're called something else, but I don't know what they're called, so we're going to call them flowers. Got new growth coming in there. I got another flower right there. We've got new growth over here, and I've got another flower right there. This flower is actually sticking up out of the surface of the water a little bit. That's that right there. So that's what the Anubius flower looks like. Again, I know that's not technically a flower. It's whatever the things that Anubius plants and rhizomes develop. But that's what it is, and it's sticking up out of the water. So I'll probably need to get in here and trim some of that up for anybody that's interested. I do sell plants whenever I've got any available. I usually have water Sprite and Java Fern available, and pretty soon I'll probably have a couple of chunks of Anubius available if anybody's interested in that. But what you see is what you get. I'm not going to promise you don't get any algae or snails or anything like that on any of the plants you get from me. They just either come out of my tanks or they come out of my grow tanks in the other room. Fish-wise, not really much to talk about in this tank. Just still doing its thing. Love my diamond tetras. They're still, do their little spawning behavior occasionally. They're always dancing their dance and dashing around the tank, looking awesome. You can see my big Pleco hiding right there in the Anubius. Its tail's probably down there somewhere, or maybe hidden towards the back. I don't know. Oh, there's its tail over here. So this tank is due for a water change because I'm starting to get bubbles in the tank. You can see they're coming out of the spray bar, and that is because the water level has dropped low enough that my surface skimmer is actually starting to suck air off the surface. And you can even see the little line right here where the water level's dropped below the plastic. And that means it's time to get in there and at least do a top off. But with this tank, if I'm going to bring the hose all the way in here to top it off, I may as well run the water out of the tank for a few minutes before running some water back into the tank. I don't have to mess with the filter, nothing fancy. Just pull some water out of the tank and put some more fresh water back in, and boom, done a water change rather than a simple top off. And so that'll probably be something I'll be doing later this afternoon. Maybe I'll get in there and do a little bit of vacuuming, get some of that Pleco poop off the bottom. Again, everything else in this tank otherwise is doing well. Nothing to really speak of. We get over here to my 40 breeder. And everything in this tank is doing well. I do need to get in and do a filter change. I can hear some sort of noisy, rattly sound in the filter. I might even need to replace the filter once I get in there and find out what's really going on with it. This is another one that has a Sun 304B canister filter on it. And so I usually use those for a few years, and when they start getting rattly and noisy or whatever, they're cheap enough that I just replace them if they get too bad. If I can get in there and figure out how to get the rattling to stop, clean them out, that sort of thing, I certainly do that first. But, nothing lasts forever. Things wear out, and if they do, again, they're cheap enough that I don't sweat it too much as long as I can get several years use out of them before I have to replace them. So, no idea what's actually going on with the filter. I'm just throwing that kind of stuff out there, thinking out loud. I haven't even gotten in there. I'll probably do a filter change, and it will sound much better because it probably is just really overdue for a filter change, and the inside of it's probably just really gunged up, and it's just, it's kind of making noise because it's working so hard to push water through all that filth. That's probably how long it's been since I've done a filter change on this tank. I've done water changes recently, but it's been quite a while since I've gotten in there and messed around with the filter. Otherwise, not a lot to talk about. My Dwarf Pike Cichlid is still doing really well. She's actually getting kind of fat. Probably ought to slow down on how much I feed this tank. Probably should slow down on how much I feed all my tanks, honestly. So she's pretty cool. She really only comes out during feeding time for the most part, or if she is out when I come in the room, she tends to go and hide a little bit. She's still a little reclusive, and that's mainly because I just don't spend tons of time down here anymore, and I'm not a regular feature of the room to the fish. So I'm either coming in to feed them, or I kind of come in and scare them because they don't know what to make of me. Not being in here all hours of the day like I used to be once upon a time when I was much more passionate about keeping my fish. It's become sort of, I don't want to say old hat over the years, but it's definitely not as thrilling and new and exciting as it was, 5-6 years ago when I was still building my fish room and still adding new aquariums, and it's still, it's been the way it's been for long enough now that it's not new and exciting anymore, put it that way. Anyway, probably need to get in and do some maintenance on this tank. Otherwise, nothing really going on in there to speak of. Just trying to give everybody a look at this tank for a few minutes because, again, not really anything going on to speak of. I need to get in there and do a little maintenance. Need to work on the filter probably, and that's about it. My New World tank is pretty much similar. Just need to get in there and do a little bit of maintenance. I did a water change not too long ago, but this is probably my most heavily stocked tank, and therefore doing, a 25% water change every 3 or 4 days probably wouldn't be a bad idea. And it's probably been, I don't know, over a week since I've done a water change on this tank. It's been a while, I'll say, since I've done any work on the filter and gotten the filter cleaned up on this tank. So that's something that needs to get done. I definitely need to wipe the glass down, maybe vac some crud out of the bottom if I can. This tank tends to accumulate a lot of crud. My main problem is that I'm not happy with this big piece of wood I put in there. I shot a little video talking about it. Sometimes, actually, I don't know if I ever even posted that video or not. Sometimes you just can't force something to work. You just can't make something go where it doesn't want to go. And as beautiful as that piece of wood is, it just doesn't work in this tank for me. And as many different positions as I've tried and as much time as I spent, finagling that thing around to get it to look just right and look perfect and beautiful, and the lines are flowing where I want them, and it's the right and it never did. It never worked. I never got it how I wanted, and now it's in there in such a way that you can hardly even see it. This is only a small part of it. The main, it's got these big long branches that come off of it, and they're completely hidden by all of this water Sprite. And for everybody who's wondering what this giant bushy green thing mass in the middle of my tank is, that is water Sprite. That's what it looks like when it grows emergent. Once it starts growing up and out of the water, it takes on very much of this sort of needly, almost like an evergreen sort of look, as opposed to that broadleaf that you would tend to think of as being water Sprite. That's water Sprite. That's just what water Sprite looks like when it grows up and out of the water. And water Sprite is a species of fern, and so it can very easily grow out of the water just fine. You can plant it in a planter and grow it on your patio out back. It's a type of fern. So another common name for that is Indian fern. I'm going to assume it's probably native to India, or at least, that part of the world, and that's why it gets the name Indian fern. But it is a fern. It is a species of fern. So there you go. That's water Sprite for anybody who was wondering what all that big mass is. Again, I sell it, so check my email down below if you're interested. I got plenty. Moving on to my snail tank that we're going to actually talk about today. Turn this fan off. This is always a little noisier than I want it to be when I get over here. Problem is, I always forget to turn it back on, and then by this afternoon, this room's going to be really stuffy and muggy. Let's have a look at how long it's been since I've gotten in here and done any work or water changes on it. Now, you can tell by the fact that there's a fairly clean filter pad in there. And yes, that is a fairly clean filter pad that I've actually replaced the filter not terribly long ago, but you can see what that Java moss is doing growing in there, and that's basically what the inside of my snail tank looks like, just piles of mulm. But I was talking about this the other day because if I'm using these as food, then I need to feed the snails well so that when other fish eat the snails, they're getting all the nutrients that the snails once consumed. So I keep a cuttle bone in this tank so that the snails get plenty of calcium and their shells get nice and hard. The reason I feed them to my puffer is so that it wears his teeth down. They have teeth very much like rodents and they will continue to grow. So it's important for puffers to chew on hard substances. I've actually seen my puffer pick up rocks off the bottom of the tank and just sort of carry them around and chew on them. And the snail shells are a good way to wear the teeth down and help keep the teeth in check, but you've got to have snail shells that are nice and hard and crunchy. And my water is so soft, I have no calcium in it. And for example, if you went and checked out some of the snails in my waterfall tank, you've got to pick them up very, very gently, or they will actually just crush in your fingers because their shells are so soft. The shells in these snails are actually quite hard, and that's because I keep a cuttlebone in there. So that's important. And then, of course, feeding the snails well and properly is also important so that they've got all the right nutrients in them when they get fed to other fish. So that's what's going on in my snail tank. We're going to move on to my purple-spotted gudgeon tank. I've been thinking about doing something different with this tank. You can see this line right here. That's where the water had gotten down to the other day before I topped it back off. And you can see it's just not the prettiest looking tank in the world. I pulled some Java Windelov out of another one of my tanks while I was cleaning that out the other day, and I just kind of threw it over my shoulder into this tank and just, basically a place to keep it alive. There's my purple-spotted gudgeon in the back there. So the water in this tank's fine. It's nice and clean. The fish is not in any danger. The water is healthy and all that. It's just that the tank itself looks all grungy and gross. In fact, a lot of what you're seeing there is already dead. I've already treated this tank multiple times. I did 2 treatments back to back with the ChemiClean, and that kills off all of this sort of grunge and growth and cyanobacteria. And I've showed you before, that's why there's that little clean spot there. But if I just wipe on this a little bit, it just comes right off. So all this stuff is already dead. I just got to get in there and actually take the time to clean the tank out. He probably thinks he's getting ready to get some food, but he's not. Now, I'm not planning on getting rid of this fish, and for people that have suggested different options that I could get rid of it, I can get rid of it very easily. I could just take this down to House of Tropicals, and they'd give me store credit for it without question. And that wouldn't be any problem at all. So it's not a matter of not knowing what to do with it. It's just a matter of, it's my fish. I've had it for so many years now. I've got a sentimental attachment to it. And it is a cool fish. I'm not, it is what it is. It's not supposed to be an active fish. It just does what it does, naturally. And, well, naturally what it does is what it's doing right now. It just sits there like, it's made out of plastic. You could just put a toy fish in there and just watch it. The only time it's really active is when it's either trying to get away from me because I've startled it, or I'm doing a water change, or if it's feeding time. And if you've ever seen one of the feeding videos, it's not really even active during that. It just kind of gulps the pellet as it floats by, and then it sits there and waits for the next pellet to float down. So, not a really exciting fish, but it's also an aggressive fish that can't be really housed with anybody else. And I really feel like I'm just wasting a really nice opportunity for a nice 40-gallon open-top tank that could have, I don't know, think about that being full of plants and then having 30 neons or a bunch of cardinal tetras swimming around in there, or something, a bunch of rummy nose or something with some color and some fire and sparkle. I just think that would be a lot better than that. And because this tank is so boring, I tend to just ignore it. I really do. I'm not going to lie or pretend otherwise, and that's why it just looks like crap like this. I just don't pay much attention to this tank. I make sure the fish is fed, I make sure the water's changed and all that kind of stuff, and whatever, I just kind of ignore it because there's nothing ever to look at. So, I don't know. Like I said, if my regular viewers will know, I go around and around. I talk about this all the time with this tank, so I'm going to stop talking about it now. We're going to move on to my 125. Actually, let me get rid of that cyanobacteria I just picked up out of there. Now we'll go look at my 125. Now, I just had somebody ask me the other day how I get my rainbow shark in there to leave my clown loaches alone. And I basically said that I don't really know. I've just never really had a problem with the rainbow shark harassing my clown loaches. And as we were just looking at that other tank, I saw out of the corner of my eye my rainbow shark chasing one of the clown loaches. But you can see he's really close to the clown loach right there, and he's not really bothering it. So I think the key to that would be, it's a 125-gallon tank, so there's plenty of room for everybody to get along. And, you could see they were swimming right next to each other, so I'm going to go with my original statement that I just don't really have any issues between them. So it's a big tank. There's plenty of room for them to find their own places and hang out and do their own thing. They can easily separate. There's lots of lines of sights being blocked and all that kind of stuff. And frankly, the rainbow sharks are not nearly as aggressive as the red-tailed shark, which is the type of shark that the viewer in question was talking about. It was they said that they had a red-tailed shark, and it was constantly harassing their clown loach. And I will say that the red-tailed sharks, I've never owned one, but I've never owned one because I've always heard from everybody everywhere that the red-tailed sharks are much more aggressive than the rainbows, and that's why I've always kept rainbow sharks, and I really do like the rainbow sharks. They are kind of aggressive. They can only go in certain type tanks. They're not for everybody, but if you can pull it off and you can manage to, you know, safely house a rainbow shark, it's definitely one that I recommend. So most people know what's been going on in my 125 here. I've shot enough video about this tank that I really don't feel like we need to really hash over it. If you're one of those people that is, you know, gets most of your information about what's going on in this tank through my around the world updates, then I will simply say that I've got this tank sorted out once and for good. I finally figured out that all of my sort of tank issues were coming from nothing more than me being lazy and overfeeding the tank and just not really paying much attention to the fact that all the food was accumulating. All of the shrimp that I was putting in there, you know, was not getting eaten. It was getting caught in the floating vegetation, and then I was basically having rotten, stinky shrimp in the tank, which caused other issues and so on and so forth. So I got on top of the feeding. I'm feeding more gently now. I'm a little more aware of what's going on with who's eating what and how much food is being eaten, so I'm paying more attention to that. I'm staying on top of maintenance a little more, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much worked out all the issues with the tank. And as far as the issue I was having with my skinny loach, just shot a video about that yesterday. You can check out if you're interested. But long story short is I tried a different medication and it worked. I tried API's General Cure rather than the levamisole that I had been using, and the levamisole was not working. The General Cure worked. Within days I started noticing an improvement, and my skinny my skinny clown loach is now on its way to recovery. It's definitely starting to put back weight, and it's looking healthy. It's eating normal. It's behaving more normally. Its color's looking good. So I really feel like I got on top of whatever was going on with that loach. And for the odd person that asks every now and again, every time I shoot video of this tank and they see that angelfish, no, that's not your imagination. That is a massive angelfish. The thing is absolutely enormous. It's probably the biggest angelfish I've ever owned. Not only are the fins just fantastic and huge and elaborate, but the body itself is big. That is a big angelfish. So I've had, you know, like I say, just about every time I shoot video of that, people are just scratching their head as, you know, is that a huge tank? Is it a big fish? Is it a little tank with a big fish in it? Why does that angelfish look so huge? And it looks huge because it is. I've not measured, but I would suspect that if you measured from the tip of its fins, and even with its dorsal fin being bent, if you just measured from the bottom of its fins to the top of the bend in the dorsal fin, you would probably be looking at 10 to 12 inches. It is a lot of angelfish. That is a big fish. Actually, you might even be looking at more than that now that I'm actually standing here. I'll get a measuring tape out one of these days and see if I can't get a little more accurate measurement on the size of that thing. And from the front, from the tip of its lips to the tip of its tail is probably also a good, I'd say at least 8 to 9 inches. Again, lots and lots of angelfish there, big fish. So moving on to my 20-gallon angelfish tank. Nothing to really talk about in here. I topped it off the other day. The water level was getting low. In fact, you can kind of see where that line is. That's a little bit deceptive. Some of that line is due to the fact that where the light is positioned, there's some shadow being cast right here, and that's kind of where that line ends anyway, and so that's why we've got that really distinct line. But the water level was down to near where that little algae line is, and I think it's also interesting that you can see sort of the streaks where the shadows are blocking the growth of the algae, and then the bright light shining on it is where the algae grows more intently. Not rocket science, but interesting to see visually like that. You can, just right there in front of you. Kind of neat looking. That, of course, is my clown pleco that I have in this tank out doing its thing, showing its mark. And that, of course, is why my rocks are nice and clean and I don't have algae growing all over everything. I've got the clown pleco, and then on the filter intake back there, let's see if it's still hanging on it. It's pretty much always on it. Should be my Whiptail Catfish, which also is a scraping off-wax type grazer, which will scrape rocks and scrape the glass and scrape the woodwork and all that kind of stuff. But the clown pleco in there is the one that really does its job keeping the tank clean. I don't know how effective that Whiptail Catfish is. The Whiptail Catfish is just a cool looking fish. I like it because it's really neat looking. So that's about all that's going on in there. Haven't done anything. I did a water change about 10 days ago maybe. Again, not sure if that was included in my last Round the World update. I know it's been a little while since I've done one, but that's all we've got going on in there. Now for my Brackish Tank, I'm going to see if I can wrap this video up in the next couple of minutes. If I can get this light turned on. There we go. Nothing at all to talk about in this one. I know I haven't done anything since my last Round the World update on this tank. And in fact, you can kind of see some bubbles swirling around right there. That probably means the water level's getting low enough that the surface skimmer is starting to pick up some air, just like in my other tank. And that means it's time to get in here and do a little bit of maintenance. And once again, just like my other tank, rather than getting in there and doing a simple top off, I will get in there and do an actual water change. So whenever I do water changes on this tank, it's so infrequent that I make an event of it, and we will actually get a video of this tank, when I'm doing the water change. We'll talk about the process and all that good stuff. We'll show how I get all those dead snail shells out of there. That's what all that white stuff on the bottom is. If you're wondering, those are former dinners. The ghosts of dinners past, if you will. Empty snail shells. So that's it. Like I said, not much to talk about. Butterbean's just in there being Butterbean, doing his thing. I do have a video of him feeding. Just kind of sitting on that one of these days when I get in too late or I'm not in the mood to shoot a video. I'll just have that ready to hand. So probably one of these days in the next week or so. You never know when that's going to happen. But I will have some video of Butterbean munching away on his live snail dinner. So there we are, back to more or less where we started, my 29 miscellaneous. And we'll say thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed. See you on the next one.